Runway by sunrise. An island no wider than a city block. A horizon of blinding water. Palm shadows etched on coral like old scars. And then, noise, diesel coughs. The metallic rasp of shovels. The clatter of pontoon pins. Bulldozer blades biting into white rock. At dawn there is scrub and sand. By dusk there is a runway. It is still warm from the day's hammering. 6,000 feet of coral compacted to the hardness of poured stone. Edged with Marston matting that clicks under boots like a steel zipper. Tomorrow, B-25 Mitchells will lift off this strip. Soon, heavier birds will follow. The island has changed species. It has become a launch pad. The men who do this call themselves Seabees, CB. Construction Battalion, workers in denim and steel helmets who build under fire and then roll forward to build again. Between 1942 and 1945, they will turn dots on maps into unsinkable airfields. The Pacific War will learn a new rhythm: seize, grade, pave, fly. This is their story. Why runways decided the war. The Pacific is a geography of distances that lie about themselves. On the map, 2 inches. In the air, 8 hours. Over water, fuel turns into time, and time turns into risk. To carry bombs across that waste, you need stepping stones, places to land, refuel, repair, and for that you need runways. Not someday, not when the shipping catches up. Now. American strategy will earn a plane name. Island hopping, but its heart is audacious engineering. Capture a workable island. Build an airfield faster than the enemy can react. Use that airfield to make the next capture possible. Each new runway pushes fighter cover, bombers, and reconnaissance forward by another ring on the map. By the end, those rings will reach Japan itself. But only if someone can make landings where there is no land. The Seabees volunteer. Who the Seabees were? They are electricians from Ohio and pile drivers from the Gulf. Bridge carpenters, quarrymen, crane operators, road pavers, welders, surveyors, dredge crews, grey hair under steel helmets. Tattoos next to wedding bands. When the Navy puts out the call for construction battalions, the answer is America's skilled labor, carrying union cards and toolboxes into war. Their motto is brutally short, can do. Boot camp for them is a hybrid of weapons drill and trade test. The question is always practical. Can you swing a pick after a night of artillery? Can you align a transit while a chaparral burns? Can you weld with rain in your face and traces in the distance? The final exam is a runway that must be ready by Monday. They will build with what they bring, what they borrow, and what they can rip from the island itself. The material world of coral and steel. The first secret is the coral. When crushed and rolled, it locks into itself like a million tiny teeth. Dozers cut it, shovels scoop it, graders spread it, rollers compact it into a hard, pale platform. Over the top, they lay Marston matting, pierced steel planking, tongue and groove, 10-foot sections that 2 men can carry, 4 can slam together, and an entire company can stitch into a runway before the sun drops. The matting hums under truck tires and throws heat like a stove at noon. The second secret is modularity. CB pontoons, steel boxes the size of bathtubs, pin into barges, piers, and causeways. You can drive a loaded truck down a pontoon pier the same day you float it into place. The surf stops being a barrier, it becomes a tool. Out of these blocks, the Seabees build their own delivery systems, improvised harbors, floating cranes, temporary dry docks, so the next wave of material can reach the beach. The third secret is tempo. Everything is staged, pre-cut, pre-measured, culverts, trusses, cable reels, light towers, fuel lines, pierced planking, bulldozer spare parts, even prefabricated huts for the crews to sleep in. The project plan is a battle plan. The critical path is paved in coral. Guadalcanal, learning to breathe on a new shore, 1942-43. The Marines name an airstrip Henderson Field and fight to keep it. The Seabees arrive to keep it alive. Bomb craters become pits to be filled. Taxiways are widened. Drainage ditches carved in the red-brown muck to keep the runway from drowning in its own sweat. Night raids flicker on the horizon. By dawn, tractors are already moving. Here they learn the craft of triage, fix what matters first. If a runway is a lung, then feeding it fuel is breath and clearing its throat, debris. Water, soft spots, is hygiene. The Seabees become field surgeons, replace a vertebra of matting here. Drain a fever of rainwater there. Brace a fractured shoulder of taxiway before it collapses under a bomber's weight. The lesson is clear. An airfield is a living thing, and it must be kept young. Tarawa, building under fire, 1943. The atoll of Besho is a strip of white heat and gunfire. The landing beaches are shallow. The tides treacherous. It is a place where the clock humiliates the invader. The Seabees' answer is to put time on their side. Pontoon causeways slither out from the transport ships like steel tongues. LVTs and trucks use them to outrun the coral heads that snag hulls and egos alike. Once ashore, dozers push berms not just for runways but for cover. Craters become aggregate quarries. The island looks like a surgical theatre after the operation is over. Blood-bright dirt, white coral bone, and sutures of steel. Within days, aircraft are landing. The enemy's plan for a dead island has failed because the Seabees refuse to let ground remain ground. Everything is future runway. Kwajalein, Eniwetok, and the assembly line of air, 1944. By now, the Seabees' work has a cadence. Survey stakes appear like a new alphabet. Coral is blasted and milled, matting snakes across the bed like armor scales. Fuel farms go up, giant bladder tanks and pipelines with valves as large as children's heads. Lighting comes last, runway edge lamps, portable beacons, a rotating light to write a new skyline in code. Fighters land first, light, nimble, easily satisfied with shorter strips. Reconnaissance birds follow. Medium bombers, B-25S, need space and strength. The new runways give them both. Each completed strip turns an island from a target into a base. And then the war asks for more. Saipan and Tinian, where the runways grow heavy, summer 1944. Heavier bombers need longer runways and broader shoulders. B-29 superfortresses arrive as demands written in aluminum. They need length. They need strength. They need logistics to match their appetite. The Seabees meet the demands with a response that redefines scale. On Saipan, an old Japanese airfield is reborn. Its surface torn up and relaid. Its approaches cleared. Its spines, taxiways and hardstands, multiplied like the veins of a leaf. On Tinian, surveyors stride a landscape that will soon hold one of the largest bomber complexes on Earth. 4 parallel runways will run like bright rivers. Hundreds of hardstands will petal outward. Fuel lines will root under the soil, ending in hydrants that hiss like vipers when the caps come off. The rhythm of construction becomes a kind of industrial poetry. Cut, fill, compact, mat, stake, light, fuel, test. The result is astonishing. Airfields that look planned a decade ago. Built in months, and ready yesterday. The night shift and the grammar of danger. Work does not stop with sunset. It changes key. Lamps go up, yellow cones of light around welders who look like living stars. Under blackout discipline, the Seabees learn to read by silhouette. A dozer is a squat letter, G, a grader a horizontal, T, a crane and L, that moves. They talk in gestures because sound travels. They invent hand signals for caution, for hurry, for, this mat needs 3 more locks. And always, there is math, moisture content of coral, bearing strength under wheel loads. The angle at which a pontoon pier can tolerate breaking surf. The Seabees are not just brawny, they are precise. Their rulers are steel, their calculus is practical, their answers fly at dawn on wings. Peleliu, when terrain fights back, autumn 1944. There are islands that resent being used. Peleliu is rock and furnace. The coral is stubborn, the ridges sharp, the shade scarce. The Seabees work in a world that hates water and hugs heat. Dust becomes an enemy, clogging filters, scouring skin, blinding eyes. They water the ground the way farmers do and seed it with oil to hold it down. They learn that engineering sometimes means making the air itself cooperate. Here the clocks feel slower. Every foot of runway is a negotiation. But the runway still appears, as it always does, because the Seabees' promise is not speed alone, it is inevitability. Iwo Jima, the runway that saved the broken, spring 1945. On Iwo Jima, 2 things happen at once: combat that eats minutes and engineering that manufactures them. The volcanic ash is treacherous, the ground soft, the slopes mean. The Seabees, alongside Marines and Army engineers, carve airstrips from cinders and grief. Motoyama airfields, captured, shattered, leveled, rebuilt, become nets stretched out for the long-legged B-29s that ditch their pride and glide down trailing smoke. Pilots will later speak of Iwo Jima as a place they did not love but owed a life to. Thousands of emergency landings prove the point. A runway halfway home is a promise kept. Okinawa and the storm at the end, spring-summer 1945. Okinawa is big, battered, and wet. Rain turns soil to pudding. Typhoons roll in with the blunt force of fate. The Seabees fight weather as fiercely as any foe. Drainage becomes as important as fill. Pavements are crowned and shouldered, weirs and culverts multiply. The war adds a new definition of air defense. Keep the runway above the waterline. By now the supply chain is an organism. Ships arrive with cargo pre-sorted by project. Shore parties unload with habits so quick they look choreographed. Replacement parts for the machines that make the next runway are as sacred as ammunition. The Seabees treat logistics like an art. It is how today pays for tomorrow. The human texture, faces in the dust. A foreman who can read weather from the taste of the breeze. A welder who sings through his teeth because both hands are busy. A bulldozer operator who keeps a lucky snapshot taped to the dash until the glue turns brown. A surveyor who names his tripod Saint Level. Men who argue over the best way to stake a centerline and then share the last cigarette in the crate. They know the sound of a tire finding a soft spot and the syllables of an officer who has never laid matting but knows a deadline. They joke, because jokes are bridges between hard hours. They sleep like people who have made something permanent in a world built to break. They are not glamorous, but they are memorable in the way foundations are. You forget them until you stand on what they made and feel how solid it is. What the runways changed. Tactically, they gave fighters reach and bombers patience. Operationally, they collapsed distances. Strategically, they took the initiative away from fortresses built on the premise that oceans defended them. An island with an airfield is not a remote place, it is a node. And nodes connect into networks that conduct power. The Seabees turned archipelagos into circuits. Electricity, fuel, planes, messages, flowed faster with every new strip. The Pacific, once a moat, became a highway. Tools of a moving city. Names worth knowing. D8 bulldozers that shoved coral like snow. Graders that gave the final crown to the runway so rain would run off and not sit. Sulking, in the centerline, sheepsfoot rollers that punched weight into the soil. Dragline cranes that fished rocks from lagoon bottoms. Pontoons that solved the last 100 yards from ship to shore. Pierced steel planking, PSP, that made the difference between someday and now. These were not exotic technologies. They were ordinary machines asked to work in extraordinary ways. The genius lay in the system, the choreography, the foresight, the refusal to improvise when a standard would do and the refusal to cling to a standard when improvisation would do better. The sound of a first takeoff. There's a moment Seabees remember more than ribbon cuttings or commendations, the first takeoff. The way the runway hums as the engines spool, the rising shiver of metal and air, the brief prayer that the compacted coral and the pinned matting and the rolled shoulders and the careful drainage will cooperate. And then the gear lifts. The bird climbs. Dust hangs where it sat. The Seabees watch until the plane is a coin in the sky. Then they turn around, pick up their tools, and start on the taxiway extension. There is always another job waiting in the wings. The hook was true. An empty island today, a heavy bomber base tomorrow. It sounded like bravado when the war began. It became a schedule. B-25s made the first leaps. Quick and sharp. B-29s made the last ones. Long and blunt. Between them stretched the labor of men who measured victory in feet and inches. Shoulders widened 4 feet here. Matting replaced in 30-foot runs there. Taxiways lengthened by 200 yards to ease the turn of something with a wingspan like a barn. The war's great decisions were often signed in conferences and carried out on maps. But they succeeded because Seabees made physical promises come true. If air power was a doctrine, the Seabees wrote its footnotes in steel. After the noise. When the war recedes, the runways remain, some swallowed by jungle, some adopted by islands now connected to the broader world, some broken into scrap that builds schools and fishing piers. The Seabees go home to unions and job sites, to peacetime projects with deadlines that feel merciful, to grandchildren who will one day ask about the scar on a knuckle and the old photo on the mantle of a man in a helmet leaning against a machine the size of a house. They will say a simple thing: we built what needed building. When it needed building, and that will be both understatement and biography. Coda, the map rewritten. Look at a Pacific map before the Seabees and after. Before, vastness and uncertainty. A blue that suggests silence and delay. After, stepping stones close enough to speak to one another. Arcs of flight paths, arrows of supply ships, a web. In that web, airflow becomes fate. The Seabees did not win the war alone. But without them, many victories would have lost their run-up. The runway at your feet is pale and hot. The edge lights blink once. Unhurried, far down the strip, a tower waves a green flag. Engines open. The story lifts. The first stakes in an unnamed clearing. Before a runway is a line on a map. It is a conversation between earth and intent. The survey crew steps into scrub that smells of salt and sap, and drives the first stake where the sea wind leans least. They read the island like a book without vowels. Ridgeline, water table, soil memory. A corporal squints along a transit and mutters the numbers that will become a threshold. A taxiway, a flare path. Men behind him string bright twine that hums in the breeze like a harp. A bulldozer coughs awake. The blade rises like a sunrise, then drops with a decision. Somewhere, a lieutenant signs for 3 more reels of cable and worries about the ships that ought to arrive with dawn. But work has already crossed a point of no return. The opening sentence of the runway has been written. Close up, how steel solves soft ground. The island grumbles under weight. To calm it, the Seabees lay pierced steel planking like a language of slots and teeth. Each section mates with a click, an audible promise that force will be shared, wheel loads spread across ribs. Ribs transferring pressure to the compacted coral below. A crew chief taps each joint with a hammer, ring for tight, thunk for reseat. To the untrained eye it's just metal, to the Seabees it's a tuned instrument. Where the subgrade sulks, they overbuild. Thicker layers. More compaction passes. Shoulders that flare wider than any manual suggests. They do not worship manuals. They respect them, and then they listen to the ground. Which is older and franker. A letter home from the night shift. Dear Ellen. You ask what it sounds like. Imagine rain made of tools. The welders spit stars. The rollers purr like tired cats. The cranes squeal when salt finds a hinge. When a plane tries the new strip, the runway hums in its own key. It's not music, exactly, but it holds me steady like a song. I keep your photo in my pocket. The dust gets under the glass and makes it look like snow. I promise I'm careful. I promise I'm tired enough to sleep even when the guns argue offshore. Tell Dad the D8 could push his old barn into next week. Love, Sam. The envelope smells faintly of diesel and coconut oil. In the morning, Sam will help anchor a fuel line that must not leak. In the evening, he will argue cheerfully about whether to crown the centerline another quarter-inch. Wars are won in such arguments. Pilot's eyes, what a new runway means. From above, the new strip appears as a pale tongue extending from green. AB-25 circles once and the pilot notices what only pilots notice, the way the windsock behaves near the lagoon. The darker patch of compacted fill that may ride rough. The clean turn-off that spares brakes and tempers. He talks to his crew through the intercom the way a father talks to kids learning to swim, calm. Funny, specific. The first landing is a handshake with the island. The brakes grab, the nose dips, the tires tell the truth to the runway. The pilot feels the Seabees craft through the seat, no swagger. Just competence. He taxis off and gives a thumbs up no one can see. Back at their tools, the Seabees still feel it. Approval travels well. Typhoon school. There are days the sky decides to erase the lesson and demand a rewrite. The barometer sinks like a drunk in a hammock. The horizon curls its lip. A typhoon walks in carrying pockets of knives. The Seabees lash, brace, drain, and then stand back. Some physics may only be endured. When the storm's jaw unclenches, the runway is a wet ledger. What stayed, what failed, the team walks it in lines. Shoulders apart, like a search party. They learn all over again. Where water insists on living, you give it a home that isn't the centerline. Where matting has lifted, you pin it like a sail that forgot its mast. Where shoulders have slumped, you teach them posture with new fill and firmer edges. The second runway is always better than the first, even when it is the same runway. Local hands, shared work. An island is never empty. Before the war it fished and sang. During the war it learns new verbs, grade, bolt, fuel, flare. Local men, boatmen, carpenters, divers, trade old skills into the Seabees orchestra. A diver who knew reefs by color now knows them by load-bearing promise. A carpenter who could coax a canoe straight with a plane now trues a form for a culvert. The Seabees teach habit, the islanders teach weather. At mess, they share food that tastes of both kitchens, rice with a swagger of canned meat. Island greens that defeat monotony. Someone starts a joke about coral that grows back at night. By the third retelling it's folklore. Improvisation as a discipline. Improvisation is not chaos, it's order in a new vocabulary. A pontoon becomes a bridge. A wrecked truck donates a leaf spring that becomes a hinge. A broken runway light is replaced with a lantern protected by the lid of a biscuit tin and the stubbornness of two electricians who refuse to be beaten by darkness. The foreman's rule is simple: if a fix lasts to the next ship. It was a good fix, if it lasts longer. It was genius. Some solutions become doctrine the way a good song becomes a standard. Others live only for a week and are remembered fondly as a clever joke that worked. The map room. In a tent cooled by the idea of shade, the map room hums. Grease pencils write futures, pins mark supplies that exist because someone insisted. A lieutenant commander runs his finger along an arc of range rings and taps the island that isn't ready yet. The Seabees senior chief watches the same ring and sees culverts, fuel headers, crushed coral quotas, sleep. Between them, a plan becomes a schedule, and a schedule becomes a runway. No meeting ends without a list of small decisions. Big wars stumble over small indecisions. The Seabees hate stumbling. The quiet technician. He seldom shouts. He carries a notebook with pages made stiff by humidity and newsprint. He writes down the number of passes a roller made on the soft patch near the west shoulder. He notes that matting locks sees more after midnight. He observes that a 140 crown drains better than a 150 in last week's rains. When praise comes, he nods and says the runway did the work. Years later, he will drive past a peacetime construction site, roll down his window, and smell fresh concrete. It will smell like yesterday. We build the things that let the things fly. The line starts as gallows humor and becomes a mantra. The Seabees build not just runways but the invisible nervous system around them. Fuel farms with pipes that exhale a sweet chemical sigh. Spark-proof switches, grounding rods. The generator shack that rattles like a persistent thought. The weather hut that gets the wind wrong exactly twice before it learns local manners. A runway without this is a promise without a wallet. With it, the island has capital. The day the big shadow left. AB 29 waits at the threshold. Her wait is a vote of confidence. The tower says words that reduce complexity into permission. Throttles slide. Air shovels itself under wings. Wheels unname themselves. The Seabees do not cheer. They listen for trouble and hear none. Later they will admit to each other, in a tone usually reserved for births, that the takeoff sounded clean. That night, one man chalks a small tick mark on a post at the edge of the ramp. He does not count kills, he counts departures that came back. What failure teaches faster than victory? They do not always get it right the first try. A soft spot found by a nose wheel. A culvert that invited water instead of ushering it along. A lighting cable that learned how salt travels. The Seabees treat these as teachers with poor bedside manner. They learn, they fix. They publish the lesson on the island's grapevine so the next crew does not repeat it 2 atolls away. Pride survives correction because pride is aimed at the craft, not the ego. A day off that isn't. A Sunday delivers the idea of rest. Shirts hang on lines. Someone reads a month-old magazine whose perfume is paper and hope. A guitar appears, the chords remember home. By noon a ship anchors and rest becomes logistics. By dusk another, day off, has been converted into runway inches and fuel capacity. No one complains out loud. They know what the work buys. Fewer names at mail call with a black ribbon around them. The guitar plays anyway, later, softly, for the men who stay late on the line. The return. The war moves forward like weather. One morning the Seabees look around and find the island quieter than it has any right to be. The runway is busy with maintenance instead of desperation. The tower's voice is a domestic sound. There are rumors, home by Christmas, home by spring, home by June. Rumors are the first ships you can't see yet. They inventory, they hand over, they show the next caretakers where the island keeps its moods. The last pallets go out on a barge that looks smaller than it should. The Seabees turn toward the pier with the casual gait of men who find endings awkward. After war work, before memory. Home is a job site without traces. Concrete pours that aren't afraid of tide charts. Deadlines that don't carry shrapnel. The Seabees return to foremen who shake hands for a full second longer than custom allows. They raise bridges and schools. Now and then, at a union hall or a backyard barbecue, someone asks about those island airstrips. The answers are plain. We built them. They worked. We built the next ones. A grandson finds an old PSP lock in a toolbox and asks what it is. Proof, the old man says, and smiles with a mouth that remembers diesel and rain. The islands today. A few runways remain, widened and tamed, hearing the drone of peacetime. Others lie under vines. Their lines visible from the air like ghosts that learned cartography. A fisherman mends nets in the shade of an old revetment wall. Children race bicycles on a strip that once measured lift-off speeds. Memory is practical here, it lives in what people use. On a humid afternoon, an aged Seabee steps off a small commuter plane and touches the tarmac with 2 fingertips. As if checking a fever. Good crown, he says softly. The young ramp agent grins. Not understanding, but pleased. Last light, same work. The sun lowers itself onto the ocean's warm shoulder. A maintenance crew walks the edge lights with a bucket of rags and a patience practiced to the point of grace. One of them taps a lamp and says, "Don't be shy, sweetheart," and the filament glows a touch brighter. Language learns kindness under long labor. Far down the field, the wind lifts, the island inhales. Somewhere a bulldozer starts, not in war, not in panic, but in the ordinary need to keep a surface honest. This is the final privilege the Seabees won for the islands they taught to fly. The right to be ordinary. And the craft to maintain it. A blueprint folded into a pocket. Plans don't live only on drafting boards, they live folded 4 times in a pocket where sweat makes the ink polite. The senior petty officer taps a thumbnail against a sketched crown grade. A culvert note, a lighting angle, he can recite the subgrade schedule like scripture. Scarify, water, blade, roll, repeat until the earth admits it's ready. When the rain starts sideways, he shelters the paper with his palm and keeps reading the ground with his boots. The quarry that sang. Coral doesn't volunteer, it must be persuaded with explosives and rhythm. The blasting crew counts down in a hush. Then the reef coughs up rock in breaths of white. Crushers chatter, screens rattle, conveyors sing. The stockpiles grow like small dun hills. And the air tastes of ocean and limestone. A mechanic listens to a bearing and says, she wants grease and patience, and gives her both. The quarry is a factory without walls. And its song is the run up to flight. Arteries of fuel, theology of fire. Fuel lines are veins you never cut. The Seabees lay them shallow and shepherded, with shutoffs placed like commas in a careful sentence. Bonding straps kiss metal, grounding rods sink like convictions. A safety chief keeps a matchbook in his pocket, not to strike, but to remind everyone what not to do. When the first pump kicks, the pipe hums like a low, contented animal. Flow is faith, someone says, and nobody laughs. Night work by the stars. Under blackout, the island becomes alphabet again. Constellations are the punctuation. The forbidding dark turns generous when you learn its grammar. Keep the lamps hooded. Keep the voices low. Keep the hands busy. A compass swings its needle and finds north the way a homesick man finds a memory. On the far edge, a lantern glows behind a sandbag screen, an improvised pappy, a wink of precision in the human night. The chaplain and the mailbox. The chaplain's tent shares a guyline with the postal shack. Both keep men whole. Letters arrive in fistfuls that smell of kitchens and laundry soap. Prayers arrive in pairs. One for the living who work until the world narrows to a bolt thread. One for the machines that must not forget their manners. The chaplain learns the names of tools. The postal clerk learns the names of storms. Both learn when to listen. Mascots, saints, and running jokes. A stray dog answers to Matlock because he sleeps on the steel planking. A gecko owns the generator shack and taxes the men in gnats. Someone paints a saint on a grader's blade, Our Lady of Level, and she earns offerings of cigarette butts before tricky jobs. When a runway segment seats on the first try, the crew slaps the matting and says, thank the lizards, it's nonsense that works, which is the best kind. Photographs that turn into runways. Aerial photos arrive clothes pinned to a line in the map tent, drying like fish. A reconnaissance pilot has written notes in grease pencil on acetate, reef teeth here, shoal here, a darker patch that might be silt. The Seabee surveyor overlays the image with a transparent grid and then with his own footsteps. Hours later, when the print has turned into a plan and the plan into stakes that argue with the breeze. Pontoon City. You can hear a harbour being born, a chorus of hollow clangs and the clack of pins. Pontoons join into causeways, causeways into finger piers into a little Manhattan of steel. Cranes walk the water on barges stitched from boxes, trucks follow where yesterday there was only swell. When a swell smacks the structure, it flexes and then settles, like a boxer rolling with a punch. Ships come closer, time gets shorter, the runway grows teeth. Red pencil lessons. A near miss is a teacher with a loud voice. A truck slid on a damp crown. A fuel hose chafed against the wrong edge. An electrician forgot that salt can climb. The foreman gathers the crew and writes in red on a piece of scrap plywood. Crown plus grip, saddle the hose, salt walks. He nails the board to the mess line and points to it with his fork until the lesson joins the catechism. The engineer who spoke in metaphors. He told the new men, think of water as a guest, offer it a path and it won't break the furniture. He said, compaction is trust you build with the ground. He said, matting is a chorus, not a solo. The metaphors stuck and moved like tools from crew to crew. Years later, someone in a far-off paving gang will still say, give the water a way to leave, and the ditch will be dug without argument. Far shores, same craft. From the Aleutians cold to Atlantic port's grey chop, the Seabees grammar of building travels well. Measure, stage, land, link, roll, light, different weather, same faith. The pontoons don't care what language the shore speaks, they square into bridges just the same. Men who learned coral's teeth learn rock's stubbornness. What changes is the smell. What doesn't is the way steel locks to steel when time is short. The last stack of matting. Demobilization looks like a miracle in reverse. The stacks get shorter. The inventory cards show margins of penciled relief. A young petty officer who has never been anywhere but islands stares at a ticket marked home port and feels the ground tilt in a new way. He walks the runway one more time, heel to toe along the centerline, counting to himself, a goodbye in numbers. Rivets that remember. Museums will later display a panel of pierced steel planking on a wall. Children will run their fingers over the holes and ask what flew from this. The docent will talk about bombers and bravery and maps. Few will say the quiet thing, that a rivet holds history as surely as a ribbon. A Seabee will see the panel and, without meaning to, check the locks by touch. Old habits honor old work. The letter that was never sent. Dear whoever inherits this runway. She likes a light crown and honest shoulders. Keep the drains flatted, not proud. Walk her after storms, before pride. Replace what's tired before it lies about it. If you hear a new rattle, it's a message, not a suggestion. Planes will trust her if you do. When the wheels thump on, think of the men who asked coral to behave and it did. Mostly, thank the island, thank the tide, thank the hands. A builder. The letter never left the tool chest. It didn't need to. The runway understood. Ordinary at last. Peace is a runway that is only a runway. A commuter plane lifts with the tidy courage of routine. A baggage cart rattles like a measure of familiar drums. The island keeps its crown and shoulders without drama. A maintenance crew jokes at twilight and polishes a lens out of habit. Far beyond, storm or war may gather, but here the surface is honest underfoot. This, more than anything, is what the Seabees built. The checklist before dawn. Before the first engine coughs awake, a crew walks the runway with a checklist soft from use, edge lights clean. PSP locks seated, shoulders intact, FOD swept, a corporal pockets 3 screws, a shard of safety wire, and a stone that tried to be a bearing. The island is not yet day, but the surface already keeps its promises. At the far end, a wind sock lifts like a lazy thought, good enough to try. Honest enough to warn. The mathematics of weight and weather. The foreman sketches numbers in dust with a stick. Wheel load. Tire pressure, subgrade modulus. He adds a column for rain and another for heat. This is not algebra, he says. It's manners. Steel must mind coral. Coral must mind water. Water must be shown the door. A new man nods, then writes the same thing in his pocket notebook because words that explain the world should be kept close. The radio that knew everyone's name. The field radio on the ramp has a personality, temperamental, loyal, proud of being first to know. It calls out arrivals like neighbors at a fence. Mitchell 25 inbound. Corsair flight turning final. Superfortress holding overhead. The Seabees don't run the radio, but they listen. Information is a lubricant. It keeps work from ceasing when surprise arrives. A lesson written in rubber. One afternoon AB-25 lands hot and finds a patch with more truth than grip. The skid is brief. Nothing breaks, but black arcs tattoo the PSP. The Seabees treat the marks like handwriting. They cut, recompact, relay, then tow a loaded truck across and listen. The sound changes from a hollow complaint to a tight hum. Enough, the chief says, not because the clock says so, but because the runway does. The day the generator forgot to be generous. Power flickers. The tower goes to lanterns and steady nerves. The generator coughs, sulks, and dies. The electrician with the soft voice and the scarred knuckles climbs inside its hot metal world and talks to it like a stubborn horse. Brushes get dressed. A belt is coaxed. A relay is convinced. When the lights return, the ramp crew cheers once. A small bark of gratitude, then goes back to quiet competence. The island inhales. Work continues. Bridges that float, roads that arrive. A new ship anchors beyond the reef, fat with promise. The pontoon platoon looks like a magician's act. Steel boxes pinned into rafts. Rafts into fingers. Fingers into a road that walks across water. Trucks roll ashore the same afternoon. By evening the causeway already has a nickname and a dent where the first impatient driver misjudged the turn. Tomorrow, no one will misjudge it again. The map of smells. A Seabee can navigate by scent, hot coral, wet PSP, diesel breath, the sharp ghost of solvent in the generator shack, salt that learned to climb, rain that plans to linger. When something is wrong, the island smells different, too sweet, too metallic, too quiet. The chief sniffs the air and says, fuel farm wants attention, and he is right, because experience is a nose that never fully sleeps. The runway's first night alone. The day the Seabees finish a major rebuild. They do not sleep in triumph. They listen in case the runway speaks. It does, in small ways. A click that shouldn't be there. A puddle that underestimated a crown. A lamp a little shyer than its sisters. Corrections are slight and immediate. By midnight the field feels older, not weaker. Wiser. The night landing that follows is routine. Which is the highest compliment this place offers. The visitor in a white shirt. An officer from somewhere important steps off a jeep. Shirt crisp in a place that eats crispness. He asks for numbers and gets them, asks for schedules and gets them, asks for the impossible and gets a plan that makes it smaller. He shakes hands with the chief and says, carry on, the way people say, thank you, without admitting they needed help. The chief nods. Pride and humility shake hands too. When the island teacher's back. A squall line sneaks in sideways and drops a kind of rain the manuals didn't include. A ditch that used to be adequate becomes a liar. A drain that used to be generous becomes spiteful. The Seabees adjust. One more culvert. 2 more inches of shoulder. A gentler crown to coax water toward the ocean's patience. The island approves. The next storm tries the new arrangement and finds it civilized. The parade of departures. Morning parades are not only for infantry. Here they are for airplanes and the people who nurse the ground they leap from. Fighters hop off with a shrug. A Mitchell leaves like a confident handshake. A superfortress commits to the decision with the weight of a courthouse. Each takeoff is a referendum on yesterday's work. Each landing is a receipt. The Seabees file both in the mental ledger and keep building credit. The story becomes a tool. By now the tale is not only told, it is used. New crews are briefed with episodes. Remember Tarawa for tempo. Saipan for scale. Iwe for mercy. The story is a toolbox. Henderson teaches triage, Tinian. Logistics, Okinawa. Drainage, Peleliu. Stubbornness. The Seabees carry history like wrenches, selected, sized, kept clean, passed down. The runway glows under late sun. Tomorrow, it will ask for the same things it asked yesterday: attention, respect, and the craft to keep islands flying.